Welcome to Moviefone's Unscripted. I'm Sarah Polley, and joining me is Jennifer Weiss, the producer of the film that I directed, Away From Her. And today we are going to be asking each other questions and taking some of your questions, and really looking forward to it. As a producer, at what point did you get involved in the making of Away From Her?
It was sort of right from the beginning when you read the short story and sort of decided to adapt it into a feature script and sort of decided to make this beautiful story. What was it about Alice Munro's short story that you wanted to make into a feature?
When I first read the short story, I was immediately kind of more moved by it than any piece of fiction I'd ever read. And I was so taken by the love story, the idea of a love that's lasted for 4 decades, and people have lived a real life together and been battered around by each other, and still, you know, some thread remains. And so I immediately, you know, imagined Julie Christie and in the lead part. I wanted to make it into a film. Away From Her tells the story about respecting the wishes of a loved one. Did being involved with this film make you reevaluate your own life at all?
Yeah. I mean, it was an interesting time for me because definitely it made me look at my own life actually, and it coincidentally was sort of, you know, reevaluating some stuff in my life. So it was.
I think for me too. Yeah. I think that like everybody that was really involved in the film was like sort of looking at their own relationship or looking at relationships they'd had, and you know, when you're looking forward at like 40 years from now, what does that mean? What
happens to that marriage and that commitment after 40 years, whereas, you know, at the beginning it's always you know, exciting, you know, passionate and whatever, but you know, the hard work comes through that journey of marriage. So,
and I think also too, just the idea of devotion is something we don't explore in a real way. What does actual devotion mean, where you actually have let each other down, you have failed, but there's some kind of need to come through, and that kind of trial and that kind of striving to kind of come through for someone in a real way. Many people don't understand the role of a producer. What's the hardest part about getting a film made?
I think obviously the financing is always people perceive it as being the most difficult. I actually find that the most exciting part, because that's the moment when you know you have something really special and you get really excited and you get to go out and kind of pitch it. I actually find, you know, production is always tough, because you have to end up, you know, walking that fine line between, you know, managing the budget but also wanting to give everything. So it's a tricky time, I find, the actual shooting part, you know.
Does it feel sort of odd that, like, it does feel like people don't really understand what a producer does, and it's such a key sort of main part of a film ever getting made? And sometimes I feel like festivals like this, I'm not sure that gets recognized in the way it should. Does that feel weird, or are you aware of that, or do you like that not being sort of...
Because there's so many different types of producers, you know, and some of them are just, you know, putting money in, and the joy for me as a producer is working on the creative, and you have to create a very, like, stable and safe environment for, you know, for the director and for the actors and for your crew. So you're juggling a lot. It's not just a, you know, money kind of, you know, raising the money or whatever. It's a real, you know, you get as involved, I think, as anyone in the film, and I think that's where I sort of, what I love about it. Did making this film give you a different perspective of Alzheimer's disease?
I mean, absolutely. In sort of preparing to make the film, I did a ton of research on Alzheimer's. I was also spending a lot of time in a retirement home because my grandmother was living in a retirement home for the last 3 years of her life. So it did give me, obviously, a much deeper knowledge of Alzheimer's. But more than that, I felt like sort of learning about Alzheimer's taught me a lot about life, and about how we age and how that's perceived and how we perceive ourselves, but also about the function of memory in our lives as it, you know, extends into our daily life generally, not just in terms of, you know, when we, you know, suffer from a disease like Alzheimer's, but how it sort of impacts our day-to-day life and our relationships and our marriages and our friendships, and the things we choose to forget, the things that we can't help but forget, the things that we can't help but remember, and the function that memory plays.
Being also an accomplished actress, are there elements of directing that are surprisingly more difficult or easier than you would have expected?
I feel like I can speak better to what was sort of, you know, more difficult than I expected. I think from being an actor, you expect that you know a certain amount about filmmaking just, you know, through osmosis or, you know, witnessing other filmmakers. And I think what was sort of shocking was to sort of realize that, you know, a huge part of your job as a director is to actually shelter the actors from what's going on, from the sort of stresses of, you know, day-to-day life on a set. So in many ways, like, I was having to kind of learn the most basic things about about how to shoot a film, and I was sort of shocked and dismayed by that.
You know, when watching you direct, I was kind of like, whew, I can actually leave and go away, but you have to be there all the time. But I mean, obviously, I think.
But it's also like,
joy
you know,
too,
juggling the personal dynamics of it. I mean, in many ways, as an actor, you're a big baby. Like, everybody cares about your emotional state all the time and how you're doing. And, you know, even if you don't feel that attention, it actually is there for you. Like, it is an incredibly coddled job. It's not glamorous the way a lot of people think it is, and it's hard work, and it's
absolutely
important.
Not, yeah.
But it's also like, for me personally, it was a lot easier. It was a lot easier than having to take on the, you know, responsibility for the personal dynamics of 50 or 60 people.
Right, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer, for joining me here.
My pleasure,
Thank
really.
you, no, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching and for sending in your questions. And please check out our movie, Away From Her.